so well to get all of us together in order to exchange and try to forge new ideas for the future. So thank you so much and enjoy your day. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Etienne. We'll continue with the two sessions with agency heads, with agency leads. We do a lot of math today. One number which we have been using at ESPI for quite some time, this relates to funding, as also discussed in the previous session, was about that while things may be changing for the foreseeable future, up until today, more than 80% of what Europe puts in space originates in nations, in national capitals, in Paris, Berlin, Warsaw, and all these other places that are nations. We brought the heads of agencies here for two dialogues. And for the first dialogue, we will have representatives from Germany, from Spain, and from the United Kingdom. I have the pleasure to welcome Walther Pelzer, Juan Cortés, and Chris White-Horne to the stage, and also Ludwig to moderate the session. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I just realized we thought to manage space is a challenge. To manage time is maybe even more challenging. And I'm not quite sure what came first. So what I'll try to do, and by the way, this was an excellent panel. Also the questions were excellent, and the answers were excellent, on spot and really impressive. So let's go. I have a timer here, so I put it on the desk, and let's see whether it helps. I try to be... I used to be a space engineer, and you try to work against the schedule. We will probably walk a little bit into the coffee break, so I can't help it. So I'll at least try to be short. I'll not give an introduction, and we go straight into it. Walther. We met in the Space Symposium a while back, and you made a great speech on the new government, and we just had a new minister on space in Germany. We were together in Berlin the other day, and there was another announcement by the Minister of Defense, and maybe you can say a little bit on the enormous energy that is putting on stage in Germany.
Yeah, thank you very much. And before I answer the question, I would like to take a little bit time to thank, first of all, ESPI, you, Ludwig, and your team for setting up such a wonderful event in such a wonderful town and venue. So thank you very much. But I would also like to thank our Australian colleagues, Margit, Elizabeth, Andreas. I don't know, they have to be somewhere here around, for actually paving the way that this is possible. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be over here for such an excellent event. Yeah, you were talking about Minister of Defense Pistorius announcing probably 35 billion for space within a time frame of five years. Just to put it in the right picture, that's exactly the same amount ESA is spending in total, if you include the German contribution. If you carve the German contribution out, it's a different topic. So. This is really a huge and impressive decision, and shows actually something that we refocus our action. Joseph gave an excellent speech. That's not always the case that I say that, but this speech was really good because really he was on the point, this discussion whether Europe is a space power, yes or not. This is not true, but he brought actually up the dimensions of power. And there we have a different approach in Europe. If you look at Galileo, this is actually the best example. There are different navigation systems in the world, but there's only one led by civil entities. Everybody else is focusing at handling the navigation system as a military one. And this shows a little bit the focus we had in Europe. We were focusing on science and on Earth observation and, as I said, on navigation based on a civil point of view. And we were outstanding, and we are outstanding. So Europe is a space power in the areas we are focusing on. And this is also the reason why we as Germany stood up for the science program within ESA and wanted to, even we know that there are some budget constraints in all the member states, also in Germany, because a member of the Treasury Department is not changing his mind when it comes to taxpayers' monies, only because there's this new bucket. So it's still very hard to get the money. But bottom line, we have to, we changed and refocused our topic, not only on science. We have to remain on this topic, but to add a new focus, and this is security. And this is what took place when Pistorius at the BDI Congress announced to invest 35 billion within a time frame of 5 years for security and space.
Excellent. And I would probably answer to the remark on the Europe as a space power. We are pretty good in midfield. We're not so good in defense and attack.
That's what I meant, the different areas of power, and Joseph pointed that out. Actually, it's not a yes or no. There are different dimensions of power. He mentioned soft skills or hard skills, and actually we should not only the different dimension of power, it's also the different areas. And we have areas where we are outstanding and cutting edge globally, and we are a well-liked partner because of our skills. And in some areas we are not, and there we have to refocus given the global changes we are just witnessing right now.
Excellent. So that brings me to Juan Carlos, who is one of our newest members in ESPI, and I think we'll have a moment after lunch today, if we get to lunch. I hope so. I hope so too. So you have the particular setup as a new agency. I think you have a reporting line into the science part of life, into the defense part of life, with a lot of talk on dual use. And we talk now about maybe also have a defense in the team. I know that Real Madrid is doing quite well right now. So what is your take on this?
Yes, first of all, Lubin, thank you very much, ESPI, for inviting us to be in this Autumn Conference. It's really a pleasure. As a new member, it's particularly a very important pleasure. So it's true, the Spanish Space Agency was created 2 years ago, and we are overseen by the Ministry of Science and the Ministry of Defense. This is quite important, and in somehow this was a visionary approach, because we decided to have these two ministries in our structure, and this allows us, first of all, to coordinate the defense activity, the science, the technology. This is a scheme where the Ministry of Defense define the requirements, and our agency acts as technology for defense provider. This is a scheme that has proven to be very effective. We have worked in the past in the SST program, developing the radar, developing the sensors. This has worked in a program you know very well, which is SpainSat-NG, because the payload was developed in ESA in a cooperation between the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Science. And this is also part of the new programs for us, the Atlantic Constellation Plus, that will be launched in short, and it's a cooperation of the agency with the two parts, defense and science, and the Portuguese friends.
Excellent. So we already have 2 cases here where the security and defense component really comes into the mix. And that brings me to the UK. And George Freeman just now said the dual use also is a commercial opportunity. And we have been on a few panels in recent time, and I think this was one of your messages, so maybe you can elaborate on that.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. My name's Chris. Hope you can see me around the corner there. First time here, so thank you so much, Ludwig. We're proud to support ESPI and all the other institutions in Vienna. It's really important to the UK, so thank you for having us. We talk a lot about dual use, and I just want to maybe say something slightly controversial, which is I think the term dual use is for yesterday. It used to be you had civilian space over here and military space there, and maybe a little bit in the middle, which you could say dual use, give it special attention. Tomorrow's world is not like that. There's almost a total overlap. It's the same companies, it's the same technologies. Okay, there are different use cases, but fundamentally you have to deliver this together. There's no future in going down separate tracks of civilian space, defense space, and so on. And that's very much how we're thinking about it in the UK. We are not going down the route which my Spanish colleague talked about, of having one agency accountable to both. There are pros and cons with that. Our government's decided not to do that. But what we are doing is having what we call a one government approach to space. So we're making plans for each of the areas of space that are truly one government, that look collectively at what technology we need, and to your question, Ludwig, what companies that we need. And one thing we have learned in the UK is we were very successful, and Minister Freeman in his day was an architect of this, in seed funding loads and loads of companies. And we've been super successful at that, and the UK is the third biggest investor in space in the world. We've been less successful at turning all these small companies into scaled companies that are commercially viable. If we act independently and incoherently, both across government in the UK and across Europe, this challenge becomes even harder. We have to think collectively about our industrial strategy, the type of companies that we want, the type of technologies that we want them to develop, and then be more interventionist. And it's really controversial to use language like picking winners and being selective, but we have to do that because we only have a limited amount of money and we have to work out where to put that. So we absolutely see the commercial sector as the way to do this. And I think because of its history, the UK Space Agency is perhaps more commercially minded than some other space agencies. And we want to build upon that as we go forward. So it's such an important part in that.
Yeah, if I can maybe hook on one remark also, again, your member of parliament made a side remark on not so sure about previous alliances looking across the oceans. And you said there is no dual use as such because everything is dual use. At the same time, it is probably true that when it comes to the UK, there is a lot on the civilian side that looks into Europe, and when it comes to security and maybe defense, it maybe looks more towards the West. And so there is a bit of a question how you are dealing with the status quo or something that we all want to maintain, but there is maybe a question of diversification. So there's something you can elaborate.
So it's not an either or. It's not you either collaborate in Europe or you collaborate in America or in other environments. In the UK, we have to do all of these things. Europe's defense is, of course, intrinsically connected to America. Global security is intrinsically connected to the work we do with what we call our Five Eyes partners in Australia and Canada and New Zealand and America. We have to operate in both spaces, and I think yes, it's a competition, and certainly at a commercial level, it's a competition. But also, we have to be that bridge, and I think this is where the UK can really help to be that bridge between the Western alliance with the US and into Europe, and also into non-traditional markets. Joseph mentioned Japan earlier on, and markets like that, Middle East, for example, where the UK has levels of influence. So I think we have to operate in all of these spaces, but I think you're going to see an increased focus in the UK on European defence and security in its broadest sense.
Yeah, that I think would be an enormous step. I know that you can bring a lot of commercial energy on the table. I know this from my previous life. So the UK is always associated with the awareness on return on invest and also benefit to economy at large. But let me take that point and I come back to Walther. So there is a lot of German ambition that is manifesting itself right now. And then we talked a lot about space diplomacy and connecting beyond, within Europe, I would say, but also across and beyond Europe. So how do you see the play of something that is a very strong national statement and investment and political will in the bigger picture?
Yeah, taking into account that cooperation is somehow in the DNA of the European states, let's say it this way. I think this is definitely a strength. When it comes to security, as just mentioned, we have different unions, let's say it this way. It's the 5E, I would even go more focused on Olympic Defender. These are actually the groups we have to take into account when it comes to the spending for the upcoming 35 billion euros we are going to invest in space. And this is an endeavor which is not going to take place in Germany only. This is for sure. We will set up a system where we are working together with our partners. This is something I'm positive about. We will set up different topics. We will start with ground systems, and our investments will go up to cislunar applications maybe. And so this is an area where we have to work together with our partners. We strongly recommend to focus on skills and capabilities, and so ESA comes into play because with their technology capabilities, with their excellence, we think ESA should be also involved when it comes to technology development. Of course, there are other topics where we have to regroup other let's say member states or unions and participation to come up with consortia to put capabilities in orbit or on ground to make space available for security on top-notch levels so that we are agile and not, as you mentioned, dependent on an entrepreneur sitting at the switch.
Excellent. And you will be hosting the ESA Ministerial in a few weeks, so I think there is an enormous interest to see how this will factor in. We just had the example mentioned by Juan Carlos on the Spainsat NG as an example where ESA actually has provided the innovation, and it was not a small piece of innovation, it was a major PPP. Before I come back to you, Juan Carlos, how do you see it, Walther, on the ministerial? So you mentioned ESA does R&D. I would say this probably includes also in-orbit validation. It can be minimal viable products. It's really something that you want to also see in orbit and test, and then you see further. So is it clear today how you would dose this?
Well, this is a decision made by the politicians how much money they want to provide. When you ask me and how I actually approach our politicians, and I try to give an example, that it actually does make no difference whether I approach a satellite not being cooperative, maybe tumbling or something like that, and you approach it, you adjust it, and you have robotics to grab it and to deorbit because it's garbage and you want to clean up our orbit, or whether it's a satellite which is kind of a danger to your own infrastructure. So it's the same technology, same software, same skills you need. So, and there are something ESA has to offer, and I try to convince our politicians and decision makers that maybe we will set up our budget for ESA based on a broader ministerial setup in Germany. So that's what I try to do.
Excellent, and I think we are all supporting that idea and looking forward to this to happen. So I come back to Juan Carlos, space diplomacy. So also in your case, Latin America as an example, is this an element of what you are up to connect also what you do in a country in Europe with ESA, also beyond the oceans? Can you give examples? What are the ambitions when it comes to space diplomacy? And you mentioned, and I think today is the anniversary, which is not a nice word for the Valencia flooding, but I think it is today, which is a good example, and it's very strange to use that word, but of disaster management and maybe a collective effort that could be one of these topics to support further.
Yeah, this is important. I will start by the latter question. It's true that these days is the first anniversary of the dramatic floods of Valencia, and I have to say that just after these floods, we activated the disaster charter in ESA. Thank you very much, Joseph. And the space technology was key for managing this disaster, but not only for the floods. I can remember also the eruption in the La Palma Island, where Copernicus was really an important instrument to manage this natural disaster. And not only that, I remember this summer with the forest fire in Spain and in Portugal, the technology based on space data was an instrument to manage and to have all the information to minimize the impact of the disaster. This is one point. Concerning cooperation, it's key that cooperation is in the DNA of the agency. We were created recently, but we were active in space for more than 70 years. And this allows us to create an agency where we put together people, competences, and staff from different ministries, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This entails a philosophy, cooperation philosophy. We are oriented to regional cooperation, interministerial cooperation, European cooperation, and worldwide cooperation. In this respect, Latin America, Africa, Asia are key partners in our future plans. It is clear that Joseph had mentioned in his speech that a space power should be autonomous, but autonomous means cooperation. It's impossible in this space activity to be independent. It's simply impossible. But to be autonomous, need to set up some links with other space power. So for us, the space diplomacy, and we are now in Vienna, which I think is the European capital for space diplomacy, is key and is one of our main lines of action.
Excellent, and I think it's a perfect handover to you to round off the conversation. Also in the UK, the International Relations Corporation are a part of your DNA, and maybe you can elaborate that.
Yes, completely. Most of my career has been in international defense relations with Spain, Germany, Italy, and all of our European partners. And like I said, it's not an either-or with our different relationships. And exactly the same as the Spanish example. Yes, we want to have more resilience and more security and more ability to operate without having to wait for, I think someone used earlier the term, someone else's finger on the button, for example, to decide when and how you launch. So things like launch is really important. It's also really expensive and high risk. So we have to do this together. And collectively in Europe, we have the ability to do this with a combination of geography, technical capability, and so on. So that's just one example. But I think international partnership has to be absolutely fundamental to how we take this stuff forward. And the perfect example of in-orbit servicing being somebody else's space control. But again, let's do that collectively. Let's work out what we need as a sovereign national capability, what we can do collaboratively, and what we can collect on the open market. And I think it just has to be fundamental to how we think. And let's not, just to echo what George Freeman was saying, let's not focus on only one way being the EU or being ESA. There are lots of different opportunities and lots of different collaborative structures, NATO, the EU, ESA, and so on. Let's use them to their best effect. And let's remember that at the end of the day, whichever ones we are or are not part of, we're all on the same team, right? We all want Europe to be resilient and successful and secure for the future. And I think sometimes we need to keep reminding ourselves of that and use the mechanisms we've got to best effect.
Yes, and we call this "It Takes a Village." It was a point I made last night. It was a point I made this morning in the introduction. I think last night we gave the numbers. We had more than 60 nations in the room, and it was, I think, more than 30 from outside Europe. So the notion of, with all what we now see coming on the table in the nations, to really put this to the benefit of the village. That is a very clear message from you. What you also did, all of you, you are on time. So you manage the time. And you see the head of agencies. This is about schedule and delivering in orbit. There are orbit mechanics you have to respect. So we have a time for one question, maybe. If there is, it has to be a very good question. Sorry, Thomas? Yes.
Valentin Eder, Space Analysis in Vienna. My question, I do see the agencies between the industry and the politics. And you talked about competition on the commercial side. And now I want to see or hear your look to the competition on the political side, how that will influence your and our work.
Well, this is a favorite subject for me, yeah. Yeah, we spoke a lot about commercialization, and there was a question Etienne mentioned, what is missing? And from my point of view, pure commercialization is missing in Europe. We talk a lot about, yeah, we have to commercialize. We have to be bigger companies. No, I would say we have to be successful companies. I don't mind whether a company is big or small. It's supposed to be profitable. This is important. Otherwise, we have to spend taxpayers' money on it, and this is not sustainable. Yes, agencies are between industry and governments, but actually what we need to focus on is that agencies step back when it comes to commercialization. Agencies shouldn't be in the driver's seat when it comes to commercialization. The only way, if we succeed in this field, is if we are able to get actually agencies, and that means also politicians, out of the game. Because we see all the time that decisions, when we start to implement competition, the governments start to implement and to getting influence in the competition. Because, of course, we are handling taxpayers' money, so governments come up with the idea, okay, they're talking about our money, so we want to reflect the interest of our taxpayers. It's absolutely okay. But this is a circle which is never, ever ending and will us never, ever get to a level that we are really competitive on a global scale. We have to break this circle.
Isn't me, huh?
We have to break. I don't think that a cell phone is going to stop me. Yeah? Then I definitely would be in the wrong place and the wrong job.
I was too quick in the praise.
But nevertheless, last sentence: if we are not able to crack this circle of influencing decisions we have in competition, which we try to implement in ESA, and they fight for it. If we are not able to get decision makers, governments, and agencies out of this process of this evaluation board, we will not succeed. I hope this answers a little bit your question.
Yes, thank you very much. And you can do that in a moment. We still give you a chance also to answer to that question if you want. It goes a little bit into the coffee break. We still have a panel, but please.
This is a very important and relevant question. I mean, first of all, the space agencies should integrate and coordinate the space activity nationally. It's clear. And in the case of the Spanish agency, we are part of an administration. We are very high in the organigram of the ministry, but this is an state agency. This means the appointment of the director is the result of a selection process. It's not an appointment. It's not a political appointment, first of all. And my mandate is decoupled from the elections calendar, whatever. I mean, it's clear that we are part of the government because we have to implement the policy of the government, but we are a technical agency. And I think that this is the right model.
Excellent. UK, it's all commercial.
No, yes, it is all commercial. Just I do want to try and answer the really good question about competition between governments, because as many of you know, 27 years of my career was in defense, where we did a lot of cooperation in Europe, but we always wanted to do everything ourselves. So you look at fighter jets, bits of the radar is built in Germany, bits of the radar is built in Spain, bits in Italy, bits in the UK, for example. That's great, but it doesn't lead to efficiency. So I think Europe's got a real challenge to balance the natural desire to use your taxpayers' money for benefit your companies and your employment and jobs and so on, with needing to be efficient. There is no easy answer. There's no magic wand that can make this problem go away, but we have to tackle it head on and think really carefully. Do we really all need to do everything? Is there a deal amongst the European nations as to who does what and who specializes, that we all benefit from it? Because I go right back to Josef's really good statistic about 10% of the money versus 24% of the GDP. We're already under-invested in space. We're just going to hurt ourselves if we compete with each other.
Thank you very much. And I think this is a very nice roundup of a panel that was on time, so it was just the questions that went above time. And I thank you very much, and you deserve a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers, and there will be a second agency leads dialogue following this one. The coffee break will be right after. So for the second one, we will have